Om Brahmanandam Parmasukadam Kevalam Gyanamurtim Dvandvaititam Gagana Sadrisham Tattvama Shadilaksham Ekam Nicham Bhimamachalam Sarvadi Sakshibhutam Bhavatitam Triguna Rahitam Sadgurum Tannamami. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Our eternal salutations to that one who is the essence of life and existence. Our eternal salutations to that one who is beyond good and bad, pleasure and pain, life and death, and all other pairs of opposites. We salute the leader of our souls, through whose grace our ignorance is dispelled. May we go beyond darkness and delusion by that grace and realize the truth in this very life. Om peace, peace, peace. For there shines Brahman. May that Brahman protect us. May Brahman sustain us. And may Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the teachings, or with the world. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. This is our second class on the Niralamba Upanishad, which translates into those two words, nir meaning like nirvikalpa or nirbijam or nirakara. Nirbijam means seedless, and nirvana, of course, is a more familiar word, for instance, in Buddhism. Alambana means that support or foundation for things, but if you put the word near in front of it, then you have no supports. So it's a little bit different than in Samkhya Yoga, where you're listing all these various tattvas are called there. These are all put forth by the great mind, visiting Prakriti and manifesting names and forms in different worlds, the expression of consciousness in forms. And also, when Patanjali looked at it, the father of yoga, he also talked about alambanas, that these were supports to be meditated upon. Simple ones are just the five elements: air, earth, fire, water, ether. Better said in order: ether, air, fire, water, and earth, because they come out that way from each other and then dissolve back into the source in reverse fashion, Lord Kapila says. And so in Kapila's time, it was meant to list these tattvas, these supports. And then Patanjali looked at the marvelous system of Samkhya Yoga and said, why don't we bring consciousness back to them, not just put them in some categories and say we know them, but concentrate on them, use them as foundations for meditation. It could be that over many hundreds and thousands of years, people have taken for granted the five elements and the five senses, maybe haven't connected them properly or have lost connection between them. And those 10 with the mind, there are also 10 others on the side called tanmatras and gross senses, gross senses. So 24 in all. If Father of Yoga thought at some later date, maybe we need to use these to recall our minds to the essence and nature of these supports that sometimes I like to say consciousness walks along, like on rocks across a river. If it wants to get from one side called formlessness to the other side called with form, or there's those words again, nir guna to sa guna, that is without attributes, to the side with attributes, then it's going to take a journey outward from its internal source, and it'll need these stepping stones from causal to subtle to gross. It's listed in Indian philosophy. Very beautiful and full way of describing it all, because it also at the same time gives us this recall about the things that are all around us and where they've come from, but as well how they come forth from the great mind called Mahat, and how the Trinity used the Mahat, like Lord Brahma, also called Svayambhava. After, he's Lord Brahma, and then he's called Svayambhava after he infuses consciousness into these various supports or tattvas, principles that are insentient by themselves, but they can become infused with some light from consciousness via Chitti Shakti. Father of Yoga said later, that is the power of thought, the Shakti that helps project our thought, turns intelligence into objects, makes thought concretized into worlds of name and form. All of that's an inner cosmology that's very wonderful to look at and to plug in a lot of these things that in the West we've forgotten in our ideologies and our religions. So that's all a revisiting of Niralambana, or Niralamba is the actual word in the Upanishad. Alambana is the word that Father of Yoga uses. So Niralamba Upanishad is talking then in a more advaitic way, just by the title, saying, well, yes, you can talk about your supports and go ahead and recall them, use them for your meditations as foundations, to remember where you are and to bring consciousness into these atmospheres, make them more divine, make them more conscious, make us more mindful, all of that. But we're going to talk to you now about Niralambana, where that which needs no supports. So when you're talking about that, you're talking about Brahman and / Atman. The Upanishad poses about 40 questions about it. We looked at the first 2 or 3 of them, not in full, but in part last week, our first class in this Upanishad. So that we'll go into deeper about that. But the idea, and I also mentioned it last week, is Niralamba, or Niralambana is also a name for Mother Durga. She's also known for being self-supporting, self-sufficient, self-sustaining, needing no other support for her existence. Divine Mother of the Universe, the goddess, like in terms of Kali and Durga particularly. So these are the things that the Upanishad, the Rishi who came forth with this beautiful Upanishad, wants us to look at. Something that has no support, out of which supports can nevertheless come or emerge, manifest, express, flow outward into what we call physical matter. It's going to stand us in good stead to know that there are origins to the physical universe that aren't in the physical universe. They're in a more subtle universe called mind, actually. But they also have other worlds, just like in this tradition that we've grown up around called Christianity. They talk about heaven and earth, and of course hell. And then you also get those teachings in the Muslim religion, paradise. And in India, you get the birth, life, death, rebirth cycle that in Buddhism you call samsara. So all of these religions have some mention in cases of different levels of vibrating particles, we could say, if you want to appeal to science to try and understand it. If you talked about it in terms of vibrating particles, then you'd want to then, in this vein, look at something that doesn't vibrate. That's the word. We looked at it as the unstruck sound at our seminar weekend before last. And we saw it in the chart last week on Brahman, epithets of Brahman. You remember that? We looked at the unseen seer, the unstruck sound, the inanimate animator, and all of these beautiful epithets for Brahma, not Lord Brahma, but for Brahman, who needs no other support than that. This vast ocean of pure conscious awareness, undifferentiated, infinite, boundless, without borders, limitless, and so forth. You can find a lot of grand words in languages to talk about Brahman, but here he's using a kind of a unique approach, saying that if you want to find it, then don't find it resting on anything. Actually, in Sanskrit, the word lamba also means dressing up. So you don't find him dressing himself up with the supports. He's free of them. He doesn't rest upon them. So that will take you in a whole different direction, is what this Rishi is telling us in this Upanishad, is that you begin then to be given permission, if you need it, to meditate on something other than supports or tattvas, principles. Because you see, in this world, everyone's looking at them and making them their focus and making them the way in which they earn their living. Water, you can be an oceanographer. If you earth, you can be a farmer, so forth. Like air, you can be a weatherman. So you focus in on these various elements, and almost to the exclusion of all of the rest. Focus in on that. Focus is good, but then the limitation that comes from focus sometimes is not good. You lose that wider perspective. Oh, that's true in philosophy too, is that you may say, well, that Samkhya system, that's nothing like that ever put out. We salute you, Lord Copula, for doing your homework with the cosmos and cosmologically. And thank you, Lord Patanjali, for also telling us that we can meditate on them. But in the Upanishads, in Advaita Vedanta, and with these 40 questions that they're bringing up here, the Rishi is taking you in a different direction. Now let's look at which needs no supports, which exists on its own, without having to rest on anything, without having to even sometimes rejecting coming into the realms of name and form, and remaining free of the river of time, remaining transcendent of the different kinds of ether or space, again, which we know there are 5 of in India. We're only counting 1 here in America, in the West, these days in our science. 5 times of ether. Very beautiful to meditate on. But nonetheless, what's completely free of all of those, even the subtlest of them, or the causal part of them? So that's how I'll reintroduce this Upanishad to you this week, and then to say also that these 40 questions or so that are asked, and specifically about 41, started off with what is Brahman, and then who is God. We marveled at the difference between those two in the Indian mind. Say, well, they'd talk about Brahman, and then isn't Brahman God? No, but no, God is actually, we look at God here in India as Ishvara. It has a form. It has a subtle form out of which all these, say, the avatars come. And in that way, then, we found there was a distinction between formless reality and God with form, saguna again. The third question was, who is the living being? The fourth question is, what is Prakriti? What is nature? And when this Rishi asks these questions, and you'll read this in the commentaries on this Upanishad if you look into them, the answer for all 41 is the same answer. They're all Brahman. And I was saying last week we could just shut the pages of the book and okay, we have one answer for 40 questions. That makes it easy for me, doesn't it? And I can walk away knowing that all this is Brahman. Of course, knowing that impinges upon realizing it. And realizing it, you need these supportive, to use the word unlike fashion, supportive facts and knowledge, Atmagyan, Brahma Gyan. That is, we were talking about it yesterday at satsang. Basically, you need Paravidya, not just Aparavidya. So it might be, I said, Aparavidya, lower knowledge, it grabs everyone's time. See? But Paravidya grabs everyone's attention. When you hear the non-dual truth, you sit still and you're rather in shock. And one of the things that it does is take away one of these more subtle supports called ahamkara, or the ego. All of a sudden, if you hear this from the lips of an illumined perceptor, that stuns you. Like when you first hear it from your guru, you realize, wow, there's a whole wealth of knowledge out there that I wasn't thinking about as I grew up. Whether I came to my guru at birth, which is very rare, or I came to my guru when I was a teenager. In my case, I came to my guru when I was 30 or 50 or 70 at the end of my life. Basically, the whole thing is all of a sudden a revelation that you can now hear this. You can get rid of the world deluding Maya by the mind transforming Daya. See, basically, Sri Ramakrishna said this great wisdom that the Guru, out of his compassion, gives to you. All the great teachers will give to people. So that might be one of the last alambanas that you'll come upon, the Guru. And he'll support you right on up till the point where you're about to enter into the realm of total realization, or full enlightenment, they call it. And then at that point, you probably, if you return to the realms of name and form, then you return with that wisdom that allows you access in both directions. Sanchara and pratisanchara. You can go out with it and you can go back into the source with it, as Kapila says in his Samkhya Yoga Sutras. So in that way, then, last week, we took up the first two and parts of the third question. What is Brahman? Who is God? And who is the living being? I left this chart up here because that's where we ended up, and we can pick up with some sort of continuity by looking at it again. You can see this is how the second question gets explained to us. Who is God? Remember, this is with form. When we talked about Brahman, that was formless. No supports needed. But one of the supports, the greatest support which Brahman will use as it manifests itself into form, will be Ishvara. It'll be one of the highest and deepest and most subtle and refined of all tattvas, of all principles that are in existence. It's conscious, it's intelligent. And here's, of course, where we can draw that sharp but very illuminating distinction between consciousness and matter. Some people, what did you talk about? We talked about it early on as God and mammon. Later on, you saw it as wheat and chaff. Difference between the wheat and the chaff. Earlier than even that, you were talking about it as Purusha and Prakriti. And then you heard about it as Brahman and Shakti. Then you heard about it as Parama Shiva and Parama Shakti. There are all these ways of, and then you heard about it as Prakriti and unmanifested Prakriti, and Mahaprakriti, the mother who holds all of Prakriti within her. So you had all these ways through the ages in which you heard about the sentient principle and the insentient matter. So today, they'd be talking about it as something like spirit and matter would be another two words you could use for it. Because a lot of people, even if they're here in matter, they still have this intuitive feeling that there's spirit, something spiritual to it all. And eventually they'll find that back inside of themselves. That's the whole beauty of it all. So the Upanishad, by asking these 40 questions, is leading us toward that. So if you were to meditate from outside the human body, using the body-mind mechanism, psychophysical being, using the ego and the intelligence that you have, and you're using that, and you're beginning to look inward in your meditation towards that formless reality, then one of the things that you would probably cut to the chase using would be Ishvara. So when you're getting a mantra, for instance, nowadays on your spiritual path, pretty much they're posing that this being that you're meditating on is not just a god or a goddess. It's not maybe even just an avatar. It's Ishvara itself. It's Antaryami, they call it. It's the inner ruler, immortal, seated in your heart. Well, here's what it looks like to the outer eye. If you're an artist that wants to make a rendition of it, you say, well, I don't know how I'm going to put all those heads on that were described in the Bhagavad Gita by Arjuna when he saw Krishna take on the cosmic form on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, on and on. But I'll take that and I'll make a good attempt on it. So we looked at that last week, all these different beings that were there. Ganesha was there, Shiva, Vishnu, the Sapta Rishis are represented there, the 7 great Rishis. One of them wrote this Upanishad. And then you see the sun and the moon, and you see on the battlefield itself, the gods and the asuras are called. It's hard to call them demons because in India they're not all demonic. They have a mixture of good and bad qualities in them. That's called suras on one side and asuras on the other. And so they're gathering. And then you can see Ishvara right there in the center, in the heart. And since we've just looked at what is Brahman, because he didn't say who is Brahman, he said what is Brahman? What is that with a capital T? Then you see it right there in the center, in the heart, all pervasive Brahman, radiating everything outwardly through its divine powers. You can see there. And then at the feet of the Lord, there you can see the famous duo of Sri Krishna and Arjuna. Sri Krishna is the avatar manifestation of God in its fullest measure on earth, and Arjuna represents humanity there. And we already read the Svetasvatara Upanishad last week, but we didn't read the final quote. So this can get us into our class more deeply today, into the questions we want to look at the answers for by reading it. So let's read this beautiful description of Ishvara out of the Svetasvatara Upanishad. Svetasvatara is one of those great rishis who left a family line and passed these teachings on through. He's a little bit more recent than the writers of the Chandogya Upanishad and Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So that means it maybe is a little bit more understandable for us students of Vedanta and Upanishad. When we hear these things, you could hear the appeal when I read it. With hands and feet everywhere, with eyes, heads, and mouths everywhere, with ears everywhere, he exists, pervading everything in the many universes. And higher than this personal Brahman is the Supreme Brahman, who attracts intelligent souls towards the highest goal of mukti. That's liberation from form and nature. Without feet, it goes everywhere. Without eyes, it sees everything. Without ears, it hears all. Though this impersonable Brahman is changeless, it seemingly grows beyond its own nature to formulate the objective universe. That's actually one of the definitions for Brahman, that which expands. By the grace of the personal God, the aspiring soul becomes free of sorrows, transcends all desires. I know this omnipresent one, who is concealed in the hearts of all beings, and by knowing which, one becomes free of birth and death. Well, you can't go to any scripture anywhere in the world outside of India and hear about being free of birth and death. You can hear about going to heaven. You can go hear about going to hell a lot. You can hear about a lot of things, but liberation from the whole shooting match, you don't hear about that in scriptures except in India. So birth, as I was saying, birth, life, death, and rebirth, they see that from a witness standpoint as being a cycle that beings enter and should be able to extract themselves from. That's the transmigrating soul that's doing that. It's the mind-body mechanism that's doing that. But there's a witness to all of it, and Ishvara is the supreme witness to that. So that's how we would say, after asking, what is Brahman? Who is God? They call that sometimes the supreme personality, because it's not just a little ego that's in an individual body. And it's not even the cosmic mind that consists of many gods, demigods, and Trinity and so forth. It's a doorway from the highest rendering of God the human mind can comprehend into the formless reality. So here is what it means. With hands and feet everywhere, eyes, heads, mouths everywhere, ears everywhere, pervading everything, that's the Ishvara. But when you come to the supportless, they describe it this way. Without feet, it goes everywhere. Without eyes, it sees everything. Without ears, it hears all. You see? So all of a sudden, it's not connected to the senses. It's behind them. It uses them without being them. So this is a very fine distinction to make. And again, you won't find it, and even in many Upanishads in India, this clear distinction between God with form and God beyond form. And you can see why Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa was very enamored with that beautiful truth or principle, verity in the Upanishads. And then he brought it here, and this as an incarnation, avatar of this particular age, and started asking everyone he ran into when he was in Calcutta and became a temple priest. His students started coming to him. Well, what do you think? Is God with form or beyond form? Nobody before that had even really mentioned it. To them, it was just all form, and God was somewhere in heaven. But to India and to Rishis, heaven was inside of you, so it had to be with form too. And when you visited it, whether it be in dream or in beatific vision, if you want to call it that, you saw things that were with form. Heaven had a form. Angels had forms. You couldn't go there and call them formless. If you managed to get beyond form, and then you found emptiness. So there was a tripping stone in philosophy along the way. And some darshanas of India ran into it and had to tussle with it, like one or two schools of Buddhism. Oh, we found the emptiness. Now there's nothing here. I think this is where I want to conclude my search. So I will give up samsara and I'll just go into emptiness, shunyata. But then punyata came to the fore. So when you got rid of everything that was in the way of your inner sight, then everything was you were beginning to see the Niralamba. You see, you're beginning to see that which had no supports. Your eye had not adjusted to it. First of all, these eyes couldn't see it, so you had to shut them down in meditation. Later on, this eye opened, and you couldn't quite see that without supports. You could still only see that it had seeds, deep sleep kind of seeds. So you weren't acclimatized with this inner eye of wisdom, the jnana chakshu, to seeing the infinitude of Brahman, which was full, full, full of everything. It contained everything in it that had form. It went into formless form, and then it went into absolute formlessness with a capital F. You saw nature, then you saw nature in its seeds, and then you saw which was beyond nature when you gained which both Kapila and Patanjali called Koivaya. You see, isolating myself from all of nature everything that had form, everything that wanted to produce a form, everything that had a tendency to lean toward form, I finally got free and isolated, koivalya, myself from it. And then I found out that it was all within me. And so some special spiritual disciplines were needed to do that. So when you read the Svetasvatara Upanishad, it's not that many pages and that many slokas, you'll come upon beautiful descriptions like this. You'll have to use a little bit of your discriminating power that this Rishi is telling you about, of the Niralamba Upanishad. Make sure that you're asking the question, what is Brahman and who is God? Because the what doesn't have a personality, but God does. And that's the supreme personality you're talking about there. And now you have the full picture. Ishvara had to come from somewhere too. The Trinity had to come from somewhere too. And so when they, at the end of their long lifetime, what is it, 100,000 years is one day of Brahma, Lord Brahma, and another 100,000 years is one night of Lord Brahma. So after their long many yuga lifetime, they'll turn this all back into that formless Brahman, just like hailstones into an ocean or icebergs into the sea when they melt. So all of these beautiful and very inspiring, elevating thoughts come to us as we take up an Upanishad. Let's look at another Ishvara chart so that we can put a little bit of a defining point on it. And that's called these 4 parts and 8 glories of Ishvara. This also clarifies the distinction that Ishvara has form, no matter how subtle or even causal it might be. You can see there 4 parts. It has Mahavishnu, it has Shiva Mahadev, and it has Lord Brahma. That's called the Trinity. And one is engaged in sustaining the worlds, one is engaged in withdrawing the worlds, and one is engaged in projecting the worlds. And then there's what's called Nirguna Shakti, free of all qualities and activities. The quote there by King Sudarshana, who had vision of the Trinity, said, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva are unable to fathom the exalted deeds of the goddess. How then am I to describe the great glory of that Mahamaya? So that's that great hand that holds within it that tempest in a teacup called Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, which is always cycling over long periods of time, producing worlds of name and form in time and space and peopling them with beings, and then withdrawing them back again to the penultimate source, back, that is, all things back to unmanifested property, and all beings back into their respective ideals, like Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, or the avatars. Those are the 4 parts and glories of Ishvara, or Ishvari. Then you see the 8 glories of them below, and you'd have to think of these qualities. They begin to take your mind towards formlessness. Omniscient, Kavim, Puranam, timeless, ancient. The Puranas were called ancient scriptures. Anushashitaram is the sovereign ruler. This is all describing, in words that we can best select from Sanskrit and English, these glories of Ishvara. Anaranian, one of my favorite, infinitesimal, or subtlemost. It's subtler than the subtle. Adityavarnam, effulgent like the sun. And you also call it self-radiant, self-luminous, they call it. It's like the sun doesn't have to borrow light from anywhere. That's how they describe Ishvara. So it has its own light within. This is why it begins to look free of foundations toward the formless. Achintya rupam, of inconceivable form. Tamasaha parastat, beyond all darkness. And of course, that's right out of the Svetasvatara Upanishad. uh, may we go beyond all darkness, it says. And Sarvasya Dataram, supporter of all beings. As Sri Krishna says, he should know, being one of the great avatars, quote, let the mind not want for anything else, but rather meditate on the Supreme Self. For that one who remembers Ishvara's glories reaches the goal. They will get the double benefit of Ishvara's feet and all that grace that comes from God with form at the highest reckoning. It will also get the doorway into formless reality. If it should want to exit the realms of name and form and time and space and merge with the beloved. Some people want to keep the beloved separate so that they can worship, love, and interact with the beloved. But the thing is, by getting close to Ishvara, like you got close to the avatars, like Krishna on the battlefield or Sri Ramakrishna with his devotees, when they start talking about these kinds of teachings, you could just see them go like this. The eyes roll up, their mouths stop talking, everything recede back in. So wouldn't you want to do that if they did that? So they're going into a formless state called samadhi. You don't just want to sit there and watch that and say, come back, don't leave me. See? But you're going to want to actually emulate that. If they're doing it, then, and they come out so blissful, then you want to experience that bliss. That's called being sugar rather than just tasting sugar. But what we're saying here in India is that both God with form and God beyond form are available to sincere seekers. What else can we say before we leave this question? Let's see here. What I've brought along with us, which may be interesting to entertain. Oh yes, one more here, because this kind of ushers us into the third question. Who is the Supreme Self? I'm sorry, that's number 5. Number 3 is who is the living being? And remember, immediately, I've already given you all the answers. So as soon as I ask the question, who is the living being? You're going to say Brahman. So that's going to be the cut to the chase answer. Then why is it that we have the living being as a separate entity? And how can we meld that or merge that back into ultimate reality? By seeing it as the Atman, which is that number 5 question that I already let the cat out of the bag about. So who is the living being is, as far as the Upanishad is concerned, is Brahman worshiping Brahman. So in this chart, you can see, and let me call up my chart and my copy here so I can share it with you nicely. You can see this human soul represented by the woman who's holding the garland in which she's going to place over the head of Ishvara. You can see it. Now we have Ishvara inclusive of the embodied being and their relationship. So this is the beauty of Bhakti Yoga. It's the beauty of adoration and devotion and love. Most people don't want that taken out of their religion. Some people want that to be the sum total of their religion. But in Vedanta, we're looking at a combination of these two ideals of form and formlessness. And so when we look at formlessness in terms of the living being, if it is going to merge into the formless reality, there's no way it can if it can't dissolve its mind with its heart. To love it is to know it. So you start with knowledge, you see, and you become, that softens the encrusted mind, and it opens the petulant heart, you see, the brooding heart, and it begins to then approach the beauty of Ishvara with an idea of merging with it. And you see something that grand and that beautiful as compared to the state your mind was in before you saw it, in most cases, then you go for it to merge with it. Bowing and touching the feet is one sign of that. You see that in India happens. It's very beautiful, called pranam, where you take the Guru's feet. Really, that is the first act of merging with this high being. But in this way, then you can see Sri Krishna comes forward to help answer these two questions. Who is God? Who is the living being? And he says in the Gita, the imperishable is Brahman, the supreme. Its dwelling in the individual bodies is termed adhyatma. Adi Buddha pertains to perishable nature, and the Purusha is the Adi Daiva. I, Ishvara, am the sole sacrificer, the Adi Yagya. The word Adi means original. So you're talking about four supremely original tattvas or alambanas here, very specialized levels of vibration that have coagulated somehow into very subtle, refined forms. The image behind it really says it all. Ishvara comes to the rescue of this great soul who is busy offering everything at the Lord's feet. You can see the 5 offerings here listed in the Gita. I offer my acts, everything I consume, everything that I sacrifice, everything that I gift away, and every austerity I do to the Lord. So this is something that would be very difficult to do to a formless Brahman. You tend to those things would tend to merge into Brahman, like trying to keep water on top of sand. A wave comes in, and you want to keep the water, but there it goes into the sand. It's gone. So if you try and make these kinds of offerings to Brahman, there it is, gone. But if you're doing this to Ishvara, Ishvara will accept that, even if it's a leaf and some water. Sri Krishna says in the Gita, even to those who are simple and just offering me a leaf and water, I love you, Lord. He accepts those offerings, and he makes their life divine, lifts them up out of suffering. So that's one of the beautiful teachings of the offering of the Jivatman to the Paramatman, you might say. And you can see that's just one of the fourfold things divided by these 4 lines. In the middle is Adhyatma, Brahman's presence in everything. We tend to call that formless form. So Brahman, it might be Ishvara that does all the sacrifices, sees through all eyes, hears through all ears, tastes through all tongues, and so forth. But Brahman's presence allows that to happen. And Ishvara then does its functions, like the Trinity will do its functions according to that presence that's animating everything from within. Probably better said, beyond within, because inside and outside are things that get merged together into one in order to get that transcendence. Very nicely put by Shankara in the Vivekachudamani. So as far as other things there, teachings there in the 4 transmigrations. So if you're talking about the individual being, they're in the process of 4 states. They're transmigrating. Hopefully they have their arms wrapped tightly around Ishvara's feet, as they do. That's the Bhutas, physical beings, the Pitrus, the ancestors, the Devas, the gods and goddesses, and Ishvara itself, the supreme form. These are all 4 levels of form. I see one of the beautiful teachings that I picked up on early when I first came upon teachings like this in the Bhagavad Gita was that they're not asking the question, are there gods and goddesses? They're saying they're part of 4 different kinds of beings. So there's no real question there. Probably people wouldn't question, are there living beings? Because they're all around them. But they'll question anything that doesn't have a form that they can't see with their 5 senses. Those are the gods and goddesses. So this is one way of sharing with people, and maybe even teaching people who aren't aware of anything beyond physical matter, that deep within all beings there's this this uh, pantheon, levels of existence where different beings are dwelling. Like with your ancestors, the Pitrus. Why do you still feel them after they pass away? You still remember them. They still visit your dreams. You go to their graveyard and offer flowers and so forth. So all of these are signs of the fact that they still exist. Or maybe then you should start thinking, like India does, everything exists all the time. It's just a matter of whether it's in form or not. So when it leaves form, it exists in its formless essence. So that's how you can look at Bhutas, Pitras, and Devas and Devis, and Ishvara itself. Sometimes they add a fifth one in there. The Bhutas also mean animals and plants. So you're supposed to sacrifice to them. So this is all based, the beautiful thing about it, it's all based upon these exist. It's not based upon do these exist. This makes you a participant in your spiritual life, not a doubter or an eternal questioner. That's always the way I've thought about it. When I read something like that, they're not questioning whether the ancestors don't exist anymore or whether gods and gods exist. They're saying they do exist and they're a part of all the living beings that are in consciousness. They're eternal. I was reading beautiful Sufi hymns and teachings today and yesterday from Judaism. They're all talking about that. They're all talking about these beings that are within them, and they still exist, and how they still get messages from them to read out here on Earth. They still have their mind looking back inside to these subtler forms. They haven't gone away. They've just abandoned outer form, but they're still in existence. And how do you see that? There are three ways of clear seeing there. Perceiving reality in the dying and the undying would be how what I was just saying would be another philosophical way of putting it, right? You're not just saying, oh, I see reality in those who are in the body, but I see reality in those who left the body too. So you see that one reality in those who are living and in those who have already passed. And so it's not a matter of a lifetime ends and then there's no existence for the soul. The soul is eternal throughout both phases. Nonetheless, it would be good to keep in mind, as Krishna says here, perceive the supreme goal. And Lord Buddha said the same. There are lots of goals you can attain in religion and in spiritual life, but there's only one supreme goal, paragatam. That's what everyone has to keep in mind. And so that it will be a matter of riding form until it no longer exists and it goes into formlessness. It's not much different really than you going to sleep tonight. Oh, I'm here, my shoulder itches, I'm hot, I think I'll take the covers down. I'm thirsty, maybe I should get up and take a drink of water. Where's the bathroom? And so forth. You're sitting there, and then you fall asleep and none of that exists anymore. You go back into your subtle form. And so it's just like that. It's like easily merging everything that's external back into the internal. And there's a place in the internal where your dreams will stop because the connection, as Gaudapada says, between waking and dreaming is between the solid and the subtle. But those two one has come out of the other. And then it starts to go back into the other. The gross disappears back into the subtle cause in your mind. But that effect has another cause back inside of your deep sleep state, where all the seeds are. And so you step back 1, 2, 3. In a 12-hour period, basically, you take 3 steps back to the seeds of everything that you are. And some souls can then, and even souls who aren't fully enlightened or illumined then, have an experience of the light there. I saw the light. Swami Vivekananda said to Sri Ramakrishna when he saw him for the first time in their lifetime, I walked around seeing the light all the time since I was a boy. It was like right up here. And I would look up at it and I would just see it. So he wasn't just sleeping or dreaming, he was waking state when he saw that light. And it went with him all the time. And the Holy Mother said when she was a little girl, four goddesses went with her everywhere. Her parents kind of laughed, like parents will. And, and she would say, "Who are those four women that come to me every time I come out the door and walk with me to school?" Oh, oh, really? So pretty soon they didn't come to her door anymore. But she said when she went out the door as a little girl, these four goddesses would come up and walk with her to school and walk her home. So, I mean, that's not only just seeing the formless light, it's seeing God with form and the gods and goddesses and the ancestors that come back. Um, Somebody told me yesterday they were in a hospital. They were having a CAT scan going through that tube. And Sri Ramakrishna came and just was there with them the whole time inside the tube. And then when the procedure was over, he went away. I saw him with my own eyes. So these beings can visit you if you're open and receptive to it, and particularly if you're in a state of worship, that purifies the mind and makes it more receptive to these visitations. Visitations of consciousness with form, in form, from the formless reality. And of course, nature and prakriti is there for what we're talking about, for the support of this. So this is a way of, like I say, segueing from the Ishvara to the living being. First three questions then, what is Brahman, who is God, and who is the living being? Let's look more at who is the living being by looking at this gradated chart. Because now we're trying to wind up the third question of this Upanishad. I'll give you the Rishi's rundown of it. The living being is the jiva, is the one who, through false superimposition, affirms, I am gross, due to name and form of Brahma, Vishnu, Indra, etc. So the jiva thinks. Though I am one, due to the differences of the causes that originate the body, the jivas are many. So probably the main thing the Rishi is saying here is that when they start to believe, they see themselves as a living being, um, then they're saying, I am separate. I'm separate from Ishvara. I'm separate from Brahman. And so that begins to convince beings. And this is how the ego grows in beings. It's the separate I maker, Lord Rishi called it. And so if they come out from their true nature and they go through these various levels of solidification down to earth from the highest level, start vibrating, they start saying, I am gross. I am now matter, is what that means to say. And then you're born with parents from matter, in matter, that's in nature. And then you come out of the womb, you start to grow, and the whole thing is being enforced by this, should we say it again? Alt superimposition. That's called vivarta in Sanskrit. So it's right here in sloka 5 of this Niralamba Upanishad. Through false superimposition, they affirm, I am gross because of name and form. I'm separate from Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, and Indra, the god of gods. Uh, they probably knew that those beings existed in them because they left the realm of Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, and Indra and came into the grosser manifestation of the worlds of name and form, the three worlds they call that. So I answer that question from the Rishi first. So Brahman is the ineffable spirit, uh, but it appears as the Mahat, the great Sankhyan. It is full of all powers without beginning and end, bespoken as good, pure, quiescent, and unqualified. God is that Brahman who, depending on its power called Prakriti, creates the worlds and enters into them as the inner controller. He is Ishvara, as he controls the intellect and the sense organs. Those are the two answers to the questions by this Rishi for the first two. And then I just read you the answer to the third question. The living being is that one who, through false superimposition, thinks, I am separate now. I am gross. I am name and form. And that's a false superimposition. It's actually Brahman. It's actually Atman. It's actually one with Ishvara. But due to this dumbing down of various particles down to from the refined to the subtle to the gross, it comes out thinking this way. But the answer to the question for the Rishi is that I am Atma Brahma, the self is Brahma, just like in our chart we just looked at. This might help explain this early chart I created by phases of a soul and relativity. Here's a good way that this gets explained by Sri Ramakrishna. He says, the jiva, that's the individual soul we're talking about here, who is the living being? He's the jiva, the Rishi says. Okay, the jiva at first remains in a state of ignorance. It is not conscious of God, but of matter and multiplicity. And, if we've defined Brahman and God as two different things with formless and formless, so the jiva is not even aware of God, Ishvara, that means. So what to speak of being aware of Brahman, the formless? That's given to very few people to become aware of the formless. There's no attraction to the formless in nature. So as we go along, I want to make these clarifying comments. It is first in a state of ignorance. It is not conscious of God, but of matter and of multiplicity. It only notices the many things around it. All right, that's sad under the auspice of false superimposition. But then what happens? Sri Ramakrishna says, upon attaining knowledge, it becomes conscious that God dwells in all beings. Sounds like the inner ruler, immortal, right? Coming forth. I have the light, you have the light, all God's children have the light, you see. And so this is how does that happen? By attaining knowledge. But on attaining higher wisdom, it discards both knowledge and ignorance and talks of nothing but God day and night. So if you want to hear about God, you go to Holy Company, because this is what's happened to them. And notice the distinction not only between God with form and God beyond form, and the jiva, a threefold difference, but notice the difference between ignorance, knowledge, and wisdom. When the soul gets to that wisdom, then that puts him beyond knowledge and ignorance. So Sri Ramakrishna's easy way of putting that is, if I have a thorn in my flesh, I got it from a bush, right? So it's deeply embedded. I go back to the same bush, pick another thorn off it, and use it to take the first thorn out. Now I've got both thorns and a little blood. See, I've got both thorns here. What do I do with them? Toss them, like a sumo wrestler tosses salt over his shoulder. He's done with them. You see. So basically, knowledge and ignorance get transcended to be replaced by non-dual wisdom. The knowledge that I'm not gross anymore. I'm not a name and I'm not a form. See. I'm one with the Lord, and then one with Brahman is coming. See, let's show how that happens here. There you see 3 levels of beings in the top right-hand corner there. With this image, Trinity, avatars, Nityasiddhas. That is, out of the Trinity, which is Ishvara, come these manifestations of pure conscious awareness in form. And they're called avatars. We had God blogs about them, 2 of them last week. We looked at yesterday in our session online. Out of the avatars, then you'll find these Nityasiddhas. Those are free souls. Swami Vivekananda was called a Nityasiddha by Sri Ramakrishna, ever perfect soul. So that's a general 3-step look at it. But if you want to take it apart more, probably starting from the bottom is best. Right there at the feet of Lord Shiva, who's offering Ram this sacred arrow, a famous story in the Itihasa. There's the animalistic level of things. So we talked about the insects and animals as being some of the bhutas and embodied beings here that we should be taking care of and looking after. So man is kind of in the animalistic condition. How is that? At first, he remains in a state of ignorance. If you look around, it's probably not hard to find many, many people acting like animals. Just put a little alcohol in them and watch for a little while. A very gross behavior, animal-like. They haven't been taught that they're divine, that they have a soul, and there are more refined levels of consciousness for them to undertake, to bring out of them, like gold out of rivers, like oil out of sesame seeds. There's something subtle to them. They have to first start to think, oh, maybe God is in everything. You see, that's the next step. So for an animalistic, you see the arrow pointing to gross. Then from animalistic, they may go on to another gross level of thinking, which is ignorance itself. I'm the body, and I'm born in nature, die in nature. Those kinds of things are ignorant thoughts. And then you can see they begin to take on a little bit of apara vidya. And that's what causes the distinction between ignorant people and worldly people. Worldly people have a vocation. Worldly people have secular knowledge, and they're making their money with that and so forth. And then amongst that, that's called a primal level of consciousness. And then the next step for them would be to become intelligent. Amongst the worldly, some people distinguish themselves, and they become scientists, and they become scholars, and they become priests, and that's really called being more intelligent and doing wiser things with their lives. That, on this graph up the middle, is a vital level of things. They're beginning to understand prana, that there's an intelligent life force in them. It'll take a while for them to find the mother of intelligence and the mother of vitality, and move from intellectual thinking energy to prana and psychic prana. And that's what's coming here as we go further along this graph. From the intelligent realm, if they can make that jump or leap of faith, they call it, then they become religious. It's a matter of whether or not that religion is of a more conventional level, as to whether or not they're going to begin to seek the kingdoms of heaven within them. And that's where you'll start seeing your ancestors, where they've gone. That's where you'll start believing in the angels, the gods, the devas, and so forth within you, is that you begin to get permission in religion to take on that level of subtler thinking that we're calling here ethereal. Ethereal means there's still some sort of occult flavor to it. So it can be also tripping point in people's inner evolution. It's really pretty much about inner evolution, right? Phases of the soul and relativity. They're working their consciousness out of gross thinking to finer thinking, to refined thinking, to subtle thinking, to causal thinking, to beyond thinking. That's basically what's happening here. So you can see the next level, because religious still connects to that risk of ethereal kind of heavenly things, occult things, is to spiritually awaken. That's what the teachers of India that are teaching beautiful darshanas, ways of thinking today, are most interested right now in seeing. The focus is all on, can we awaken them spiritually? There's much beyond just awakening. So, and some of these beings have seen that, and they own it, they possess it. But to awaken them spiritually would be the first thing. We can get them moving back towards this inner trajectory that begins to look more like celestial rather than ethereal. At that point, then, it might even be possible for beings to see beyond heaven. The same Svetasvatara Upanishad that we've been looking at says that in its early slokas. It's basically, we saw that through worshiping God, we had to eventually go beyond the heaven-aspiring senses. So the heaven-aspiring senses work in right there. You hear about heaven in religion. You don't hear about that in science or back with your family, worldly family. That's just a pipe dream. You start hearing about heaven in religion. And so that's about the time when, if you spiritually awaken, if you can spend less time in the conventional runs of religion, and you have a touch of a great soul, whether it be an actual touch, like Sri Ramakrishna said, "Oh, mother, it takes too much time to awaken them up. Can I do it with a touch?" he asked her. So he could actually touch certain beings, like he did Narendra, who became Swami Vivekananda after that touch. So in that way, then, if you find a person that's got the samskaras for it, you can work with them, and you can awaken them spiritually. So that's a great level to transcend to that level. But look what's beyond it there. I mean, spiritual awakening is a kind of celestial level, but to go beyond the heaven-aspiring senses, you see what's called a spiritual practitioner. And there's, of course, a great difference between someone who practices the truth stated in the scriptures and one who just reads the truth and leaves it at that, maybe makes their living on it. And so that's a more cosmic level. So we've gone from the gross to the primal to the vital to the ethereal to the celestial to the cosmic in consciousness. And we're about ready to receive that arrow from Lord Shiva, self-directing arrow, as Ramprasad sings, which goes straight to the heart of the matter. So if you're practicing hard enough, long enough, you become an adept at spiritual life. That's the next level. It's called from cosmic to divine. From the spiritual adept to the spiritual master is called from the divine to the universal. And a past master is a nice level to cite too, as there are beings like Sri Ramakrishna and like the avatars shown right there in the picture, who have become past masters. They've entered realization of the superconscious level of things. And so they go up and down the amber stairs of birth and death, taking forms and giving them up as easy as a child puts on clothes and outgrows them and puts on new sets, as is said by Sri Krishna. It's really a quick study, and that encompasses what the whole chart, what we just said. But let's read the quote from Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. He says, "There's a great accumulation of God in man than in other creatures. God is born as man for the purpose of sporting as man. He is called Narayan. Ramakrishna and Chaitanya are examples of this. By meditating on the divine incarnation of God, one meditates on God itself. If God can manifest through the image, then why not through man? A very beautiful thought to hear from an avatar or from a great past master would be that. They say, well, there are people starving on the streets outside the temple. Why are you in the temple offering shining leaves and flowers to images of stone? Oh, because God's in them. Oh, well, very good, but isn't God also a living human being outside in the gutter, starving, thirsty, hungry, suffering? Why didn't you turn some of that worship toward them? And that was part and parcel of what Swami Vivekananda was saying. And there have been other people in other religions that have made that jump too, to actually turn back and help mankind. Om Namo Narayanaya. Every time I get a letter from a Swami of the Ramakrishna order, they start with that usually. Salutations to God and man. So they want that to be known, that the divine there, at least at the divine level there are people who are spiritually awakened, practicing and become adept, who have become God now, or God has become them. They've put on the overcoat of divinity, and they wear it now, and it protects them, and it introduces them to higher and higher levels of consciousness. So all of this today we've concentrated on under the question of who is the living being. So we've looked back, we said, who is God? What is Brahman? Who is God? And who is the living being? And basically, that living being is the Atman. And that's sung quite well about Swami Vivekananda too, in some of the hymns, when they put that about the Atman, mankind being the Atman. Himadre Ashrame Jayantyam Nirmitaha Bhujangang Shraddhini Nivrite Nutane Stavoyang Yatapate Sabhakya Tanaraha Sashaktim Parusham Viramgam Charjati Narendra Shashave Narendra Yavane Narendra Kridane Narendra Shikshane Narendra Palane Narendra Yarpane Viveka Nandate Prabhate Pranjali Viveka Nandate Prabhate Pranjali. One verse out of Vivekananda Pranjali, written by a more contemporary Swami, looking back on Vivekananda's exemplary life. In this verse he says, to all those who would attain freedom and realize the Atman, the living being, realize the Atman, we encourage the chanting of this hymn, composed in a sacred Himalayan mountain retreat, like the one we're going to soon. Devoted recitation of these verses on Swami Vivekananda imbues one with physical vigor, mental strength, and spiritual power, and increases discrimination and detachment. For in this brilliant dawn of collective awakening of all beings to higher truth, we offer Narendranath, Swami Vivekananda, the leader of our souls, our eternal salutations. Vivekananda te prabhate pranjali. Many hymns have come out of Ramakrishna order and various beings, both lay and monastic, to these great beings that SRV is named after, Sharda, Ramakrishna, and Vivekananda. And so we take time to sing them whenever we can. And as we work our way through this Upanishad, because many of the other questions can go by rather quickly, shall I just give you a little peek? Who is Brahma? Who is Vishnu? Who is Rudra? Basically, we kind of already saw that when we studied Ishvara. Who is the sun? Who is the moon? That they mean, basically the gods, Surya and Chandra. Who are demons? Who are evil spirits? They're going to make some differentiation there between the two. Who are men? Who are women? Who are animals? And then that's up to question 18. And then 19 starts in a new direction. What is it that is immobile? And then who are the Brahmanas? What is a caste? What is a deed? What is a non-deed? Then karma starts to be taken up. What is knowledge and what is ignorance? What is pain? What is pleasure? What is heaven and what is hell? And one of my favorites, what is bondage and what is liberation? What is it that is to be adored? Who is the disciple and who is the guru? Now they're entering into a very deep level of this. When you get a lot of what wasn't said when we went up these graphs was the meeting of the disciple with the teacher. Who is the sage? And then after the devotee, the guru, and the sage, who is deluded? Those beings that turn away from holy company. And then who is demonic? Those beings who have become worse than worldly and have just really gone back to animalistic behavior. What is austerity toward the end? And which is the supreme abode? What is to be sought after? What is to be rejected? That gets into Gaudapada's Karika kind of level. Finally, the last question is, who's the mature renouncer, the sannyasin? So there we finished the Upanishad. Of course, those are just the questions. Then there's all the answers that he gives and all the answers that I'm going to give you as we go on over the next 3 weeks. This is the second of 5 classes in this Upanishad, Niralamba Upanishad. We're seeing all of this underlying reality that has no supports. That is, it can use supports, but it itself exists without them. And so we could call this, the maturest type of transcendentalism. That's what you're meditating on when the thoughts go away. Pretty much you've lost the support of your mind and your ego and your intellect. Now you're in a higher state of awareness. Like Sri Ramakrishna talking about 3 kinds of knowledge last week. Remember that God blog? And how first there's knowledge of religion and so forth. Second, there's meditation, the second kind of knowledge. But finally, there's that knowledge that's given to you by grace of the Lord, and how grace and self-effort then have to go hand in hand. Sri Ramakrishna put it in 3 ways. So here we put it in some dozen ways, and also put a graph from gross to superconscious there. So I haven't probably called that old chart up for some long time. Number 22 of 400, and 400 and I think 6 now. So good to look at these old workhorses that we had a long time back and bring them forward again. Let's see what else we have about the next question. Next question asks, what is Prakriti? So it's very beautifully put, right in order. What is Brahman, that amazing reality? Then, what is Ishvara when it takes the most beautiful form? Then, what are all the living beings that are coming out here? They're all Atman. You see. Now what? What are they sporting on? What is Prakriti? See how beautiful it is? It's like a fast forward or a zipped up more composite of Lord Samkhya's Lord Kapil's Samkhya. Just let's put this right down here right away and ask these 4 questions. So in the remaining time, I'd like to go through just a few minutes, go through this chart of nirguna and saguna. As we have Niralamba Upanishad, which without supports. So nirguna is going to be, well, we don't see any signs of any of those supports there in Brahman. That's divine reality of a non-dual kind, beyond thought and beyond intellection, beyond concept. It's even beyond the word, as I was reading about a lot the last 2 days. I'm trying to look for mentions of the word in different religious traditions. But another thing that it's going to be beyond is ignorance, knowledge, and wisdom. There's a lot of triputis that get brought in here as teachings that is something that the soul has to traverse inwardly. And then when it gets to these higher levels of consciousness and awareness, it no longer becomes a problem to think about going beyond knowledge and ignorance, even going beyond wisdom. That's where the attraction of the Lord takes over. That's what Sri Ramakrishna called Yoga Maya. If she can make it possible for beings to wake up by just hypnotizing them, that's the power of Yoga Maya. So he was sporting in forms. He saw visions of Radha and Krishna. He saw visions of Shiva and Parvati. Saw a vision of Hanuman. Saw a vision of Jesus, baby Jesus. Then he had his fill of all these great visions. And then one day he said to the mother, because she was his guide in all this, is there any place or anywhere where no divisions exist? Because I can have concourse or darshan with these great forms, but then I go away, and I lose the vision and they're gone. Is there a place where there's no divisions between me and them? And so then she took on the form of Yogamaya and took him and showed him the absolute reality. He called it Satchidananda. So absolute Sat, truth. That's maybe what you'll get to beyond ignorance, knowledge, wisdom. What's next? Truth. And Chid, Satchidananda, Chid would be this awareness, pure consciousness, where you could see how consciousness is realized at a higher level. Remember, it's not the consciousness that's changing in these people. That's always one Brahman, one indivisible Brahman. It's their ability to perceive that consciousness at different levels and leave behind that which needs to be put behind me, as Jesus said. So that's Ananda. Then, of course, she showed him bliss. So Satchidananda, she showed him a place where all these distinctions disappeared in all these beings. So he got both. He got his fill of darshan with divine forms within himself, and then he got the absolute reality itself. We call samadhi, or satori, or nirvana, or asampragyata. That's which is also now we're calling Niralamba. So not much time left here to look at this chart. Let's start with this next week on our 3rd class, because it will it'll introduce us into this question about what is Prakriti. Prakriti is going to be all the saguna Brahman, you see. And it has a sort of initial starting place all the way down to the 5 elements of earth, air, fire, and ether. And then consciousness, these are supports, of course, alambanas. And then it gives up these supports and goes back to the word, goes back to Divine Mother, and gets back into Nirguna Brahman for her, like our chart said, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. And then there's this primal Shakti that's taking us back to our initial source again. Purusham Artam, as Father Patanjali says, Father of Yoga. Shunyanam Gunanam Prashabaha, beautiful slokas at the end of the Yoga Sutras about Divine Mother, the Chitti Shakti. So we have made our way as far as we could possible today in this beautiful Upanishad. So we will end here then with a chant. Raghupati Raghava Rajaram Patita Pavana Sitaram Jaya Raghupati Raghava Rajaram Patita Pavana Sitaram Sitaram Jaya Sitaram Bhaja Pyare Tu Sitaram Sitaram Jaya Sitaram Bhaja Pyare Tu Sitaram Ishvara Allah Tero Nam Sabako Sanmati Di Bhagavan Ishvara Allah Tero Nam Sabako Sanmati Di Bhagavan Jaya Raghupati Raghava Rajaram Patita Pavana Sitaram. Om Jananim Shadradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Pado Padme Toye Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhur Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat